Let's go ahead and get started. We do have a quorum, and to begin, we will call the roll. And by calling the roll, we'll ask each member present to identify themselves and state that they are present.
Leslie Nesmith, present.
Ray Douglas, present.
Chris Steele, present.
June Elkins Baker, present.
Will you join us in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pastor Douglas, would you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would like to note that the meeting, the notice for this meeting was properly posted on March 3rd, 2023, and we are in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. Agenda item number 1 is public comment. I have not received notice of public comment. Seeing none, we will move to agenda item number 2, which is discussion and possible action to approve the minutes from our February 8th meeting. See a motion and a second? Maybe? The queue is now open for voting.
Down here by me. That's okay. It was busy down there.
The motion passes. Hannah, you're right on time. Well, listen, all we've done so far is call the roll, and we have done the Pledge of Allegiance and approved our minutes from our February 8th meeting. So we are on agenda item number 3, and we're so glad that you are so glad to see you and that you're able to be here with us. Agenda item number 3 is discussion and possible action regarding a monthly report and current data pertaining to the Oklahoma County Detention Center from Mr. Mark Opegard. Mark, you're recognized.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here. I will try to do my best on this. Of course, this was Brandy's presentation to the trust on Monday. Okay. It's that one, but the first bit. Oh, okay, I can go back. I'll go back. Okay. Well, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. Let me first start off by addressing that we did have a death of an inmate, Mr. Kenneth Parrott, that was passed away at the hospital on February 27th. He'd actually been in the hospital for about 10 days. He was admitted on the 18th of February for significant pre-existing conditions. We worked extremely hard with his attorneys, the DA's office, the courts, to try to secure a medical release for him, a medical release bond. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his medical condition before that process could play out. He was being held on assault and battery charge with a $100,000 bond. As Major Garner, Interim Chief Garner, had expressed, she's confident that we did everything we could possible in our power to secure his release. But that ultimate decision is, of course, in all these cases, up to a judge. So today, the presentation is going to focus on the current state of our budget. Also have an update on the medical OR bond process. I'll share some operational statistics for you all. And then, of course, I'm going to talk about a recent contraband search that we had at the facility. Now, the budget here. So as you can see by the slide, the outlook for the rest of this year is we're looking at a $1.6 million deficit by the end of the year. By our calculations, we're actually going to run out of money on June 1st, 2023. In January, if you remember, the county accidentally overpaid about $600,000 to the IRS for a tax overpayment. Now, we actually were reimbursed that money about a week ago. We did receive a check back from the IRS, so we were all square with that. But because of the overpayment, what the county decided to do is that they gave us the next month's allotment early. What happens with the budgets is you get an allotment every single month, and that tied you over for that month. So what they did was they paid us the next month's allotment early. So what that means is by the time we get to June, we will not get our allotment. That is what's called for why we're forecasting a $1.6 million deficit at that time. Now, we're also waiting and trying to work with them to get ARPA payments back. We spent $1.1 million on approved ARPA projects around the facility that came out of our budget, not budgeted items, just items that we felt that were necessary for the proper running of the facility. And we're still waiting to get that money reimbursed. There's also the issue of $4.5 million of approved projects that can't be funded right now due to the requirement of reimbursement under our subsubscription agreement. And once again, we feel that these projects are absolutely necessary for the jail, and it's not something we can dismiss or put off in anticipation of a new facility that could be about 4 years down the line. So that's I know that during the presentation on Monday, we had the interim CFO give a more in-depth look at the budget. I'm not necessarily prepared for that. That's not my expertise. But if later on, if you do have any questions, I'll try to do my best, and maybe I can get those answered for you, or at least get those questions to our CFO and get those answered to you. So employee update. We had 60 new employees begin Detention Officer Academy on February 27th. During the month, we terminated 5 full-time employees for cause and had 11 voluntary resign either by job abandonment or formal notice, and then we had 1 retirement. Now we continue to advertise on websites, on social media, and are always looking for new ways to recruit employees. We did have, Major Garner talked about she has had several former employees have since started reaching out and inquiring about coming back. And so some of those people are actually in the process, and we'll see where they end up on that. But once they go through the process, then they will probably still have to go through the Detention Officer Academy as well. Now, as of today, we have 294 employees. February, we actually held a job fair at the facility, and we felt it was quite successful. We'd like to have a lot more. And so we are making plans right now for having another one at the facility in March. We have not set a date yet, but I would assume it'd be at least in the next 2 weeks. We would have a lineup for that. We also have our next academy is going to be, I don't know the exact date, but I believe it's probably going to be right around April 1st, because the other academy, the last academy that we're going through right now, started on February 27th. And that takes about 3 weeks to go through. And then after that, you wait another week in order to regroup to have another one. So by then, we're right at the end of March. So I don't know the exact date, but I believe it's probably going to be right around the 1st of April, if not the last part of March. We'll have another academy. And right now we have, from what I understand, we have a number of employees or a number of applications that we're going through right now and making offers. And we'll get those shored up in the next couple of weeks so that we can get those numbers for the academy, especially by the next trust meeting. So, medical-owned recognizance bonds. I'm sure you're probably all familiar with what an OR bond is. If you're not, it's basically a bond that we can get the judge to release someone on a medical bond, which basically we identify people that we feel that their needs are probably a lot more than what the jail and the medical staff of the jail is capable of caring for them. We continue to work hard to try to get those bonds. Right now, let's see, during February, we identified 51 individuals who may qualify for a medical release. Out of 39 of those individuals, we requested a bond for. Now, we were able to secure ORs for 7 of them. Unfortunately, one of those on the list was, of course, Mr. Kenneth Parrott, who passed away at the hospital before he was able to get that bond. Now, we continue to identify the individuals who meet this criteria, and we will continue to request their release. Of those 51 identified, 39 were submitted, 8 were denied, and some of that was due. 3 of those were sentenced to the Department of Corrections. 2 of those were sentenced to county jail time. 2 were denied by the DA and 1 was denied by a judge. Of course, we had 7 granted. Now, again, it's all up to the judge. Sometimes some of these individuals we're requesting on do have serious charges against them. So for many of these people, the option is probably not going to be on the table. But for everyone else, we figure we'll bring it to their attention and let them make the decision on whether or not they want to release them or not. We're not going to decide ourselves who we should bring forward. We're going to bring them all forward and then let them decide who they want to grant those releases to. So we also have 11 waiting mental health evaluation right now. Let's see. 12 of them, of course, yes, 12 out of that total, that 51 that I'm talking about, were not submitted because they were sentenced, bonded, or released prior to that, or had some other type of OR that they were able to secure. So then we didn't have to go forward with that. Now let me talk about the 3 cases of concern right now on the medical OR bonds. Case 1 is a middle-aged male with lower extremity redness and open stasis pre-existing wounds. These types of ulcers are due to abnormal vein function, typically caused by high pressure in the veins of the lower legs. And when the veins have one-way valves that keep blood flowing towards your heart, when these become weak, scarred, or blocked, blood can flow backwards and pool in your legs. Patient is also HIV positive, has hepatitis C, and is refusing medication and wound care. Now, in this situation, we are challenged by the individual's refusal of medical care. Now, the MD recommended a medical OR. However, serious criminal history and current charges are likely to keep this individual in our custody. The individual has also recently been hospitalized again, and he is in at high risk of dying in our care. Number 2 was a middle-aged male with significant history of diabetes, diabetic ulcers to both legs, partial amputee, and significant cardiac concerns. He's very frail with open wounds, legs are discolored, highly susceptible to infection. He also recently presented with mental health concerns. A medical doctor recommended the medical OR, which we are seeking. His bond is under $25,000. His condition is likely to deteriorate the longer that he remains in our custody, putting him at significant risk of dying in our care. The 3rd case is an elderly, frail male with multiple advanced medical conditions. Visits to ER for decreased mental status, history of stroke, transient. He's got a pacemaker, severe hypertension, only partially controlled with medication, has dementia. Symptoms include forgetfulness, limited social skills, thinking abilities, so that impairs with it, his daily functioning. This individual also has very serious charges. He's got a 6-figure bond right now, and the medical OR has been denied. His condition is declining. He is also at a high risk of dying in our care. Now, these are just 3 individuals who have significant health concerns who may deteriorate while they are in custody. And there are many others we have been able to successfully get released back into the community under supervision and with resources to manage their conditions. Now, we wanted to present these 3 to you to inform the public of the challenges that we do face when we care for our population. Now, I also want to publicly thank the District Attorney's Office, judges, public defenders, and multiple community resources for their assistance and support of the efforts in improving these outcomes. And again, there's a lot of people that work hard in trying to help us to secure these people out, but in some of these cases, the severity of the charges and the high degree of bond precludes them being allowed to being released. Let's go over some of our monthly statistics here, releasing and booking for February. We released 1,840 for the month. 1,815 were booked in. That's an average of about 64 book-ins a day. That's about average of what we see. The average detainee population was 1,546. Now, just a year ago in February 2020, that number was 1,676. That's about 125 less. We have seen that over the last couple of years. It started to go down. It went back up at the beginning of COVID because, of course, everyone was in lockdown and the courts weren't working that much. But now we've been able to get more people out and get them out quicker too, which is a very positive. Admission demographics. Now, just on a personal note, these are the ones that I'd really like to put together when I put together her trust, put together the presentation. There's a lot of statistics that we have that we can pull out of our jail tracker software. One of these right here. Average population by sex. Female 14%, male 86%. The female age is the majority of females are between 30 and 39 years old. In fact, 72% fall between 18 and 39 years old, which is typical of what you probably would expect to see. Now, the majority of males are between 30 to 39 years old. Now, last month, that number was actually 18 to 29-year-old males were our majority population. Now it has flipped, that it's just the opposite of that. Now, also, 4% of our population is over 60 years of age, with 9 males in their 70s. We have 1 person who is 80 years old at this time.
Wow.
Also on admissions demographics, marital status. So you can see the vast number of detainees here identify as being single, with married being the next highest. You have divorced, then separated. There are a few detainees who are also widows or widowers. Now, the reason why this is important, because you keep a stat like this, so when somebody comes in the jail, and then you can find out maybe they're recently single, recently divorced, recently widowed. That can go a long way to try to interpret maybe their mental status at the time. So some stats that we keep, some people might wonder, why would you keep something like that? This is a good example. That way, when somebody comes in, and if they identify as I'm a widower, oh, recently, yes, within the last week, then you understand that this person might be going through something that they may not be exhibiting at the time, but then we can make a note of it and then look for it and maybe set up a mental health visit, something, so that we can understand that this person might be going through something that they may not want to talk about right now. Crime classifications. On the slide we're looking at here, the male population has a total of 1,919 criminal felony charges and 1,786 misdemeanor charges. That's the male population. The female population, currently 389 felonies and 513 misdemeanors. Now, a large number of detainees have actually multiple criminal felony and or criminal misdemeanor charges. And when you look at recidivism on the bottom page, in the female population, 86% of our female population right now have been into the facility at least one time, or at least booked in more than one time. The male population, 82%. That means that that majority of people have been booked into the facility more than once. And in many cases, it's well more than twice. So that's another stat we can take a look at to understand who's coming in there and what kind of help that they may need when they're in the facility. Recently, we did a contraband search. We partnered with the Office of Inspector General from the Department of Corrections. We utilized 6 of their drug contraband search dogs. We did find some contraband in the facility. It was most of minor. However, it did send a strong message, and we hope it keeps sending a strong message to the population that we will utilize every resource available to intercept and prevent the introduction of movement and contraband in the jail. And so we will set this up and do these occasionally. Now, we don't let anybody know when we're doing these, because we don't want anybody to know when it happens, but we are going to be going forward doing things like this, and we have other things that we will be releasing in the future of efforts that we'll have to try to stem the tide of contraband. Trauma-informed response training. Now, this is we have secured 5 dates to our detention staff through trauma-informed response training. Our goal is to get the majority of our detention officers through this training by the end of this year. Now, this training is essential. Growing evidence that supports a high incident of trauma and co-occurring problems among men and women in jails and prison. Now, as someone who has worked with the population for years, Brandy can attest, not me. This training will provide our staff with an understanding of the prevalence and effect of trauma and how to put this knowledge into practice. Now, the goal is to reduce the effects of traumatic exposures while not creating new trauma that will exacerbate the symptoms of previous trauma. Now, this training will also cultivate a new culture we are working towards. Now, for some examples, trauma-informed action. Now, if you quietly moving and respectfully informing individuals of where they need to be, a not trauma-informed action is like yelling lunch or yelling med pass, something on those lines. Now, an informed trauma response is language such as, hey, let's talk, let me find someone who can help you, may I help you? It's just the language that you speak and the message that it conveys can have different meanings towards different individuals. Now, also, a not informed trauma response would be superior or punishing language such as, step away from the desk, referring and giving them a direct order, where an informed response would be referring to someone by name and not using their identification number or their pod number, getting on a personal level with them to let them know that, hey, I know who you are, you know who I am. Let's talk about this. It can go in a different direction. So those are the type of things that they're trying to instill in the current detention officer staff that we have. And again, we have 5 of those coming up, and we're really excited to take a look at those. Mental health iPads. Now, this is something we talked about, I think, last time we were getting them. We have now received them. Department of Mental Health provided us with another layer of support for managing mental health crises within the facility. The iPads are the same that law enforcement have when they're out on the streets, with a direct 24/7 connection to the 3 largest community mental health providers in the county. Now, when staff becomes aware of someone in a mental health crisis, they can utilize these iPads to connect with a mental health professional. Now, they can also be used at intake for an evaluation for someone, any person who is coming into the facility experiencing a mental health crisis. Now, we can also use the information gained by the evaluation to request ORs for those who meet the criteria, and the clinician will also be able to locate bed space for those individuals at an outside facility if need be. It also helps with the continuity of care. If an individual is already a consumer or a client of a specific provider, then we can reach out to that entity directly on the iPads and connect that individual with the provider. Now, the iPads can also be used confidentially by staff who may need to talk through traumatic events. So they'll be able to utilize that too as well. Now, having this tool is available is a step forward in working towards improving partnerships between the detention center, mental health providers, and also the courts. And that's my presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Mark, thank you so much for being here, for the communication, for the transparency, for the explanations. I just think it's incredible. I would ask our board if there are questions, comments. Pastor Douglas.
I do have a couple of questions. Again, thank you for sharing with us. When you were talking about the medical situation, what is the process for housing those that are critically ill that you're not able to get a medical OR for?
So we, on the 13th floor is where the medical is, and so we have a medical staff up there. It's sort of a hospital area, and so when those individuals who are really critical and they're trying to get them help, sometimes they are sent to the hospital, maybe on a daily basis or every couple of days if they're really dealing with issues. A lot of times they may be in the hospital, and we would pay for a guard to stand watch 24 hours a day. So that's what it is. We've done things in the past. There was an individual a few years ago that we needed to actually go out and purchase a medical grade bed for this individual. He was very large, and it was just too small for another bed. So those are things that you take into consideration case by case. This person needs this, so let's find out a way to give this person this care. And sometimes it is at the hospital with a hospital guard.
Okay. Thank you. And then the other question I had, when you were giving the demographics, do you keep statistically the racial makeup of those that come in?
Yes,
Okay.
that is another one too as well. We keep that statistic. I mean, almost anything you can think of when somebody gets booked in, they're asked questions about where they work. Now, a lot of times when people are booked in, they don't have a job, or they may not tell you where they work because they may not want the person they work for know that they were brought into jail. And so it's all dependent on their answers that they give us. But we do keep up a lot of those stats. Race, religion too as well, if they answer those questions. There's a lot of different stats. And Brandy had talked about at the trust meeting too, to give input on if there's any other type of stats that you guys would like to hear about, just let us know, and I'll be able to go through and find out if that's something we keep, and we can, of course, provide those at future meetings.
Right, thank
Yeah.
you.
I would be interested in the stat of who has also been at the juvenile center, if that's available.
I'm not sure based on if it's a juvenile record.
Oh,
Sometimes those
gosh, yeah.
are closed. And so we also, they used to house juveniles at the detention center
Mhm.
before they changed the law. And now they all go over to the juvenile detention center. And so they face different rules than we do.
Boy, that'd be interesting to know, though, wouldn't it?
I'm sure it would, yes. So our system, we wouldn't ask them that question, and it's not connected to their court system, computer system. So that's probably something that we wouldn't have any knowledge of how many times they've been there.
Mark, just a couple of questions. On the medical OR bonds, just for clarification, and I heard you loud and clear, and so I want to just also validate and underscore the appreciation, the collaboration coming from the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, and our district judges as well. But for the sake of clarification, who ultimately makes the decision to either grant or deny a medical OR bond?
I believe it is in the hands of a judge.
Ultimately, it's the
Ultimately,
judge.
they will be the one that'll decide whether or not they want to release them on the bond or not.
And they're looking at a whole bunch of factors in addition to
Yes.
just health concerns.
Yes.
I wonder, I read in the paper either today or tomorrow, yesterday, or maybe I read it tomorrow already. I don't know. It's all my days are running together. There is a pending lawsuit in the state of Oklahoma in relation to the timeliness of mental health assessments, competency, mental health assessments in relation to determining a person's competency to stand trial. And as I read the story, and all I know is what I have seen in the newspaper, the allegations at least is that there's a delay and there is a feeling among some that it's taking too long and that individuals with legitimate mental health challenges may be having to stay detained longer than what they otherwise should be because it's taking so long. I don't think that that's the responsibility of the Oklahoma County Detention Center. And I want to be fair here, and if you just cannot comment, I understand that as well. But in Oklahoma County, my question is, what is our experience with the timeliness of mental health evaluations and assessments being conducted for individuals who need that?
So I'm not an expert. From what I understand, what the process has been is when you send them to the state, I believe it's Veneta, they only have so many beds. And they're trying to get people in from every single county in the state as people waiting. So there's a waiting list that you get put on. Now, one of the things that we did do, and we've talked about this at other meetings before, is we partnered with the State Department of Mental Health. It's the first partnership I know of in the state of Oklahoma where we have actually connected with them directly with the inmates that are either getting ready to go there or will eventually go and need an evaluation at Veneta. And so one thing that I have been told in a meeting a little while ago was, I don't know the exact number, but there has been a number of individuals that were in our custody that were on the list to go to Veneta, yet they were able to regain a competency in the jail by the Department of Mental Health before they were actually had to go down to Veneta. So that's one thing we're working on. I think this is a program that it's very worthwhile that we're trying here. It allows them to get in front of these individuals instead of having to wait 6 months before they go. Now they know who they are already. They know they're in the facility. They can determine if maybe we need to get them on some type of medication right now before they go. So all this treatment will do is to help treat them beforehand. Now, some of these people will eventually have to go to Veneta as well to get a full competency, but at least you can start. The goal is to start the process now while they're in our custody. So then that way they just don't deteriorate while they're sitting waiting 6 months for somewhere to go. Does that answer your question, I think?
It certainly does. Very, very helpful. Thank you. And my final question is, and I don't know what's classified and unclassified information, so at any point say, Chris, none of your business, and I will receive that um, the way it needs to be received. But in relation to your search, the searches that you guys conducted that you referenced in your report, you mentioned that the majority of any contraband that may have been found was minor contraband. Can you give examples of what might constitute minor
So-
contraband?
I was gone last week when they did the search, but what I understand when they mean minor contraband is maybe they found some tobacco, a little bit of tobacco in somebody's cell, or they found a charging cell for a phone, or some matches, things like that. They may have, I don't know if they found any of the other narcotics. I wasn't in those meetings. But when they say minor, they mean somebody had something in a book. Because contraband can mean anything. It doesn't have to mean drugs. It could mean just whatever the facility, shoelaces are contraband, things like that. So it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything that was brought to my attention that said we found a major amount or something like that.
So it might be things that are against the rules, but may not be in and of themselves illegal.
That's true. Could be. I think that's some of the stuff they found as well.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions? Mark, thank you so much. This is so incredibly helpful and such really good information.
All right, thank you. And again, if there's any other types of stats that you guys want to take a look at, just let us know. Get the information to me, and we'll make sure we include those on future reports.
Appreciate all the details there.
Yes, thank you.
Really good. I believe that we are in order to entertain a motion to accept the report.
I'll motion to accept that report.
There is a motion.
I have to say my thing is not doing anything. Oh, hey, there it is.
And is there a second? There is a second. The queue is now open to vote.
Yes.
I believe the motion passes. Agenda item number 4 is discussion and possible action regarding focus group discussions with individuals who reside in the Oklahoma County Detention Center. I think at this point, I know at this point that everyone on the Citizens Advisory Board has graciously participated in focus groups that take place on a monthly basis. And I want to say thank you to the participation of this committee. We are back at the top of our rotation, offered a written report. It's a draft at this point because I still want to make sure that we are including all the information necessary. But on March the 3rd, Aaron Engelkey, Hannah Royce, and myself conducted focus group discussions with both women and men who currently reside in the Oklahoma County Detention Center. Just a reminder, these discussions, these conversations, these activities are intended to elevate and include the voices of individuals who are residing at the detention center in order to gain a firsthand account and perspective of the reality of the state of affairs and garner ideas for improvements from people who have lived experience. Here are the following observations from the women residing at the detention center. They stated that there is a need for additional programming and pro-social activities. Suggestions for pro-social activities included art classes and related activity, hair care and the ability to have their hair done, parenting classes, and access to more books and potentially even book clubs to discuss books that they might be reading. They stated there is a need for more physical activity and access to sunlight and fresh air. They stated there is a need for more information and effective communication concerning pending court hearings and related legal issues. Interaction with staff, they said, is improving, although it can vary from staff to staff. There seemed to be a basic consensus that when staff are treated with respect, they in turn offer respect to individuals who reside in the detention center. They very clearly stated that there is a need for additional staff members. They said there is a need for additional opportunities to change out their clothing. It was reported that the women change their outer clothing approximately one time a week and are allowed to change undergarments 2 to 3 times per week. The amount of recreational time and time out of their cells has improved. Most individuals are allowed out of their cells 4 to 6 hours for up to 4 days per week. It was reported that the food portions are small and also contain a lot of starch. The women said that they would greatly prefer healthier options and larger portions. They reported sleeping without sheets due to others misusing their sheets to engage in unauthorized activities and unauthorized communication. And finally, several of the women stated that a 5-minute phone call each week is just simply not adequate to communicate with family members and to stay connected with their support groups. They suggested a goal of 30-minute phone calls per week as the optimal time needed, and those 30 minutes do not all have to occur at one time, but maybe 30 minutes throughout the course of a 7-day period. From the men residing in the detention center, they expressed concern about commingling individuals with untreated mental health conditions or challenges in with the general population. They suggested a need for more literacy programming, especially technology literacy, to know how to properly utilize the kiosk, the iPads that are now available, and the technology that is coming into the detention center. They expressed a desire for access to fresh air and sunlight as well. They stated that access to additional hygiene products would be extremely helpful. Several of the men reported that bed bugs were still an issue, and some reported concerns about communicable diseases being transferred through bed bug bites. I want to take just a second to tell you, we've kind of followed up on this to see what is fact and what is fiction, but at least one of the young men had a concern that if a bed bug happened to bite an individual with a communicable disease and then quickly thereafter bit a different person without a communicable disease, could that communicable disease be transferred through the bed bug bites? I do not think that is reality. According to the information and the health people that I have spoken with about that, however, the stress of not knowing or the stress of believing something that perception becomes reality. And I think on that note, I just want to say how important it would be to perhaps consider, for us to consider, maybe in the orientation process, or maybe just through more effective educational services, that we're able to teach some health related classes so that people can at least have a peace of mind and know what is real and what is not. The men expressed a desire for more frequent site checks while individuals were in their cells, and they said they feel safe. They feel like the environment is safe, but they appreciate the staff coming by on a regular basis to make sure that individuals are doing well while they're in their cells. It was reported by the men that additional programming is also needed, and additional pro-social activities would be very, very helpful. They also stated that the food portions were small, and some even stated that it's not altogether uncommon for individuals to scrummage through the trash bin when the trays are empty to try to get additional access to additional food. They stated interaction with the staff has improved and that they are also spending more time out of their cells on a regular basis. The men also reported witnessing the staff working hard and even going the extra mile to meet basic needs and to treat people with respect. One of the men shared that he had been in and out of the detention center several times and that the floor on which he currently resides is, quote, the best I've ever experienced, end quote. And then finally, they reported that they would like to see additional staff employed primarily to assist and support the positive efforts of existing staff. A couple of other additions I would like to report out just in this report. Director Gardner, I want to say this, she's not here, but I want to say it publicly. There was a situation that we became aware of in which a person with a chronic condition was released from the jail without proper medication, without any medication. This individual harbors no ill content, but just wants to see processes improved so that a person who may be ill, who may be discharged through a medical bond or otherwise, at least has enough medication to last them through the weekend or through a week as they begin to get back on their feet and transition back into the community. I mention this to tell the board, in line with this report and feedback from individuals who have or are residing at the jail, that when Brandy Gardner became aware of the situation, she asked to meet personally with the individual who had been released. She said that she wanted to hear their story directly and work with that individual to implement changes and improvement. I think Lieutenant Gardner will tell you that her goal is that no one with a chronic condition would be released without at least a week's worth of proper medication. We also did hear while we were inside that the programming that is available, particularly the grief support groups that are being offered through Calm Waters, are having a tremendous effect and are being literally transformational, I think is a word that I heard. And there's a lot of excitement about the programs that are currently being offered. And then the final thing that I would say in relation to this is we are also in communication with Director Gardner for this board to conduct routine focus groups with staff members, just to get a perspective from staff members on an ongoing basis. Chairman Douglas, who is chairing the subcommittee on recruitment and retainment of staff, and Aaron are providing surveys on a quarterly basis, staff surveys. But in addition to that, we're hoping to have this very same kind of interaction on a more regular basis so that staff can be involved and their voices can be included in all the decisions that are being made. Hannah, you were there, you were fully engaged, and I know that you probably caught some things that may have been missed since this is a draft and only a draft at this point. Do you have any additional insight or information that you would like to provide from the individuals that we got to speak with?
Thank you, Chairman Steele. This is a super detailed report. I really don't have much additional. I learned some things, as we always do during these focus groups. Sometimes detainees can be taken out of the detention center, brought over to the courthouse, thinking that they will have court that day. And when they don't end up having court that day, and they have to just sit and wait and be brought back to the detention center and then given a new date for court, they call that a baloney run. And the woman that we spoke to said that that happens more often than she would prefer. So I don't know what miscommunication perhaps is there with the courthouse and public defender's office or judges or what. But I know that not only is it difficult for them to communicate with their family and friends, but it's difficult for them to get proper understanding of where their case is at and where they are in the court system. So the food was very concerning. They both men and women underscored that a lot of people are very hungry in the facility. Very, very hungry. That when they do get protein, it might be a mystery meat. They don't really know what they're being served, right? And then they mentioned a lot of starches. And then there are just a lot of folks who don't have money for commissary, right? So even if they do, there's not a lot of healthy options in commissary. So that's something to think about. The women mentioned they have plenty of pads, but not tampons. And I know that different community organizations are donating those at different times. And then really quick, the last thing would be the mail, just letters arriving late or they were sent. I know the detainees have to hand over their letters open, the envelope open. And one detainee said that it was mailed still open. Nobody closed it when they mailed it out. So that sort of thing, just some the communication really with their being able to mail out things or get in touch. I hope that we can find a way to have their not just phone calls improve, but mail as well, because it seems like a lot of them are mailing books or asking for things from their family in letters when they don't have any more time on the phone, right? So I appreciate all of them and the staff that allowed us to go take that focus group. I know we stayed a little longer than we maybe should have, but everybody had really was very, very vulnerable and honest. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Just two observations, and then we'll open this report up to questions or discussion. One, I want to say again, thank you for the board, and also thank you to the administration at the detention center for allowing these focus groups to occur. The feeling of validation from the very observant, very honest, very earnest individuals that we spoke with was impactful. They expressed appreciation for being able to have their perspective included in our discussions and also the discussions with the jail trust. That's one thing. Number two, Pastor Douglas, I need you to know that this term that we were made aware of when a person is taken to the court and then they really don't have a court date, this term baloney run was the PG version of the phrase. That's what I'll tell you. That was the family version of what they call it. Yeah. Season. Are there questions? Discussion?
Actually, I have something, and I'm not really sure if this would be the appropriate time frame, but looking at our agenda, it probably is the most appropriate. I did have an attorney ask me to bring something up And that is that there are cameras in the attorney-client rooms, in the meeting rooms, and she's been told that they don't work. But she said if they don't work, they need to be removed because of attorney-client privilege. And I think that's a reasonable request. Yeah. So wherever we need to put that, I think that's a valid ask.
I think it's exciting to see that, Reverend Douglas, when you and Chris and I went, that there are some things that changed, especially a more outside time for the women, whereas before I don't think they were getting out. And I'm kind of in agreement, and I don't know what we can do. What is it, a 5-minute call once a week is really not a lot, especially if you have a lot of kids and you want to talk to all your kids. I mean, and it's only once a week, 5 minutes. It's not a lot of time.
And you mentioned that actually made me think of speaking to their kids is a rarity if they're in school. So when they get their phone call, it might not be after 3 p.m. It might be during their rec time from 9 a.m. to 11:30 or whatever, and so they're only getting to speak with who's available, potentially not even their kiddos. So some of the women did mention that that their kids are in school during the time that they're allotted that 5 minutes.
That would seem like somewhat of an easy fix, I would think, just based on who has kids that they have been with or tending to or around as a caregiver, because that would be real important, not only for the inmate, but for the kids to be able to connect. That would be very important.
June, if I may just underscore the importance of what you are addressing in the jail trust meeting on Monday, this past Monday. Yeah, Trustee Buck had, Director Gardner had also extended the invitation if there is additional data that the jail trust would like to receive in their monthly reports to let them know. And Trustee Buck had asked if they were tracking how many individuals are primary caregivers at the time of being processed into the jail, because he said that it's important for us to understand the impact that detainment is having on the entire family unit. And so I think that that's right in line with the importance of what you were bringing up at this point. Additional comments, additional questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept this report. There is a motion. There is a second. And the motion passes. Agenda item number 5 is discussion and possible action regarding a report from our recruitment and retention of staff subcommittee. Chairman Douglas.
Thank you, Chairman Steele. Our last meeting, we continue to discuss having recruiting events in the quadrants of the county on a quarterly basis. It was brought up that we would look at OCCC, also Metro Tech, and then, as Chris said, that we were looking at having these focus group meetings similar that we did with the detainees, with the employees, to, I guess, supplement the data that we get from the surveys, and so that we can make better recommendations, not only to make it a better place for the detainees, but to make it a better place for those who work, and understanding that if it's a positive work environment, that the attrition we saw in the report was almost even. They had 16 in, 17 out. And so some of the issues and problems that we just addressed, even with it has to do with staffing. And so it's very important, I think, for us to help the management there come up with ways to recruit and retain. And I think these suggestions that we're coming up with from that subcommittee, hopefully, if they're taken to taken in regard will help with that issue and problem that we have. So there are some other things that we brought up to discuss with some of the next steps, like childcare and things like that, and that we will have in our next meeting, whenever that is.
It's a great report. You all are doing yeoman's work, just amazing work. I appreciate so much the efforts that you all are putting forth. Are there questions, comments concerning the report from the Recruitment and Retention of Staff Subcommittee? Seeing none, we would entertain a motion to accept this report.
Motion?
Motion is made and seconded. The report is accepted unanimously. Agenda item number 6 is discussion and possible action regarding a report from the Policy and Procedures Subcommittee.
We didn't meet.
We didn't meet, and we are assessing as we lost Trustee Buck, our chairman, and we had a few things that we were attempting to get from Major Garner as far as policies with the handbook and things like that. So we will have a better report at the next meeting after we've met with our policy and procedures crew. So thank you.
Fair enough. We may want to consider a vote to require that Stephen Buck still participate on that subcommittee. You guys are doing great. Thank you so much. There's not a need to vote on that agenda item, I wouldn't think. But thank you for the update. Agenda item number 7 is discussion and possible action regarding a report from the Operations Subcommittee. I think our chair of that subcommittee is not here, so we will move past that agenda item. And agenda item number 8 is discussion and possible action regarding a report from our Community Relationships Subcommittee.
This is a little bit similar because we're meeting right after this meeting. I had a conflict last month, so we decided to move to right after this meeting to discuss, and we might meet again this month at our regularly scheduled timing, just because today's agenda items kind of get the conversation going for the survey that we're going to prepare for the community, as well as identifying other ways we can engage the community through that.
Perfect. Chairperson Royce, I want to tell you that we wanted to keep this just to give us the opportunity to announce what's on the horizon. And you got some really important and great work coming our way. So thank you for that update. Again, because it's not an official report, I wouldn't think that we would need to take action. Agenda item number 9 is simply an announcement that our next scheduled meeting will take place on Wednesday, April 12th at 9:30 a.m. in this room. Wednesday, April 12th, 9:30 a.m. in this room. And then just very quickly, our subcommittees, the next scheduled meeting of our Policy and Procedure Subcommittee is scheduled for Wednesday, March 15th at 2:15 p.m. The next meeting for the Operations Subcommittee is scheduled for March 15th, immediately following the meeting of the Operations Subcommittee. The next meeting for the Recruitment and Retention of Staff Subcommittee will take place on March 22nd at 9:30 a.m. And then finally, the next meeting for the Community Relationships Subcommittee will be held on, after today, will be held on Wednesday, March 22nd, if needed, at 10:45 a.m. And with that, would entertain a motion to adjourn. And that motion passes. Thank you very much. Not too worried about that.
thank you, Chris. I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you. Thank you very much. This is a special event. It feels like that we are growing in our communication and in our connection with our purpose. I really think that. You got Easter coming up.
We have Easter, and then we have immediately after Easter what we have is called simultaneous revival. So several churches in Northeast Oklahoma City are in revival at the same time. So starts the Monday after Easter and continues to the Sunday after Easter. So they'll have services evening, well, have evening, noonday, evening, and late night. So the noonday services are mass services. Everyone will gather at one church, and then